We are live as live can get here on 50 plus AM FM stations across the country and around the world. We have got some incredible guests with us today to kick off our broadcast day. We, of course, the man, the myth, the legend, IQL Rizzoli, who is just amazing. Whenever I upload videos of IQ to my BitChute account, holy smokes, do these people have all sorts of things to say about IQ? Good things and bad things. We also have with us today Ruler of the Seas author Don Mazzella. He, of course, SB Digest and the Robotics Education Foundation. We'll talk about that a little bit later on with Dangerous Don Mazzella. And a guy that I have known for goddamn 10 years or more.
Oh, at
Michael
least.
Butler.
Yeah, more
Michael
like 15
Butler with
years.
us today. How are you, Michael?
I'm okay. It's good to talk with you. It's been a while since I've been on your show, and I've been on it many times, and it's good to see you and hear your voice.
So Michael, to start us off here on our first segment, you've got a book. You've got a brand new book.
I do. I have a brand new book.
Tell me and Dawn and IQ about it, and then we'll ask you some questions and bat things around here.
Okay. Well, this is my latest book because in the last 4 years, I've released 4 books. And this one I just came out with is a pictorial book. It's the German 1940 war campaigns through Western Europe. And I got hundreds of thousands of photos from the National Archives taken by German combat photographers and propagandist photographers. And so I created a 400-page pictorial book using a lot of text that I'd written and additional text. A lot of the text I'd written previously, and then I put in new text. And it's a 8.5 by 11 book, so it's a good size book, the larger format, and it's got about 400 plus pictures, and it's came out really well. I'm very pleased with it. And the great thing about it is all the photos, of course, are public domain. Because these they were confiscated by the American Army, then they became part of the National Archives, and then they got mined, and I was able to use them without any worry.
That's awesome. So Dawn, start us off here. I know you've got some questions for Mr.
First, I'll say that was clever. Talk about getting content. But let me ask you, I guess my first question is, after putting all this together, what conclusions did you come to about the photographs, the photographers? What did you anything come out of these things that you felt?
Well, first of all, the photos are very well done with top-notch photo equipment. And one of the divisions that I used was the Erwin Rommel division, the 7th Panzers. Now, the reason Rommel became a Panzer commander right before the invasion of the Western Europe was that he was close with Hitler. And he wasn't part of the general staff, the elite Prussian German general staff. So he was plugged into the last minute, and Goebbels liked him and Hitler liked him. So they loaded him up with photographers and made him kind of a propaganda division. And he also did great things because he led from the front and did things that a lot of other division commanders didn't do in that campaign. So a lot of the photographs that were created were real high quality, which was great. And when I got them through a third party. They were scanned into high res. So I was able to easily transform them into pictorial stories. The other part of the photos, the parallel part, was taken by a guy named Heinrich Hoffmann, who was Hitler's personal photographer. And in fact, Eva Braun was an assistant for Heinrich Hoffmann, and Hitler met her at his photo studio. So that is how
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so those photos are very high quality. Hoffmann is famous for being Hitler's personal photographer, and he didn't take all the combat pictures because he was very scared of being in the close range of fire. But a lot of his staff did, and they printed a book in December 1940 called "With Hitler in the West," and it was a propaganda publication with 200 great pictures. And so I essentially took that book and broke it up into 8 separate chapters, and then pieced it out through the whole text. And it's very well documented. And then I used Erwin Rommel's book and other source materials that I had from other German generals. And I created this pictorial story, which gives you a real nice text picture and the photo pictures with it as well.
Well, let me ask you this question. The Germans poised and allowed the English to evacuate from Dunkirk. Did you, if you may remember?
Well, yeah, the word "let" is a bit. I don't think they actually wanted them to be able to evacuate. There were a lot of mistakes made, miscalculations, misjudgments, and Hitler often during the middle of a campaign would get kind of this victory disease. In the midst of great gains, he would get very nervous and he would start to lose his sense of focus, and his commanders became very frustrated with this. Now, the other part is the tank commanders thought there's no way we can take our tanks into the Dunkirk area because it was too marshy, and the tanks would have gotten stuck anyways. So there was also that valid part of we couldn't go in there, and then the English had a great navy and the 800 ships from Britain that were able to evacuate everyone. So there's a lot going on there.
Well, that's true. What always they talk about is the fact that they didn't maintain air superiority over Dunkirk. Either, uh, in effect, if you look at some of the anyway, but I guess well, what I've seen over time is they simply muddled um, and let the British
Yes. I
evacuate.
tend to agree with that. If they would have been able to stop that, boy, it would have been a far different war.
Yes, but now um, if you look at the unfortunately I haven't seen the book, but I guess ask the question. Yeah, American photographers, particularly in Pacific, were up close and personal with our troops. Were the Germans doing the same thing?
Absolutely. They were right there along with the tanks and the infantry, and they were there in harm's way. Absolutely. And they also had really first-rate equipment. I mean, they had Leica cameras, which were the best cameras in the world at the time. So they were, and also I've got thousands of pictures of the Russia campaign, and they were in there as well. Now, one thing is, as the war progressed and the tide turned against Germany, the number of photographers and the number of photographs taken by German combat cameramen fell off considerably because it wasn't a priority anymore because they were just trying to survive as best they could as they withdrew from Russia or North Africa or wherever.
Well, the thing that always surprised me, well, I'll rephrase the question. Uh,
Mhm.
the German, even in the middle of the war, German the logistics relied on the horse rather
Yep.
than the truck. Did you see that in the pictures, or did they concentrate on the mechanical side?
Well, we saw both, but I'll tell you, in that Western campaign, there was one picture which thought was so funny, and it shows a German column, and the guys up front were riding bikes, and then the other guy up front was riding a horse, and there were a bunch of goats and cats and dogs following them. So that shows you, yeah, the German industry could never produce enough to make the army fully mobile. It was
Yes.
never able to do that. And they had to have horses. And even when they had a lot of trucks, they weren't always the most reliable. They were high-tech gear that was tough to service in the field, and they had lack of spare parts. So they never had the overwhelming superiority. And when they saw the numbers that were being produced by the American factories, like in 1942, a lot of the German higher ups got those from secret agents, and they didn't believe those figures. There's like no way they could produce 50,000 planes in a year, and but it was all true. And so yes, the German army suffered from lack of mobility because their industry could not produce the numbers that they required.
Well, they also seem to indicate the tire tank needed 10 hours of support for 1 hour of combat versus 1 hour for 1 hour in our patent tanks. I mean, do you think that, I mean, do your photographs and those photographs reveal some of this?
Well, they do show, they don't show it too much, but within the text that I put in to supplement the pictures, there are the stories of many breakdowns in the field that couldn't necessarily be fixed because you got to remember this the period that I covered in this particular book, 1940. A lot of the big tanks hadn't been produced yet. The Panzer III was the dominant tank in the Western campaign, and the French and the British had better tanks. They had better tanks, better equipment, and more soldiers, and they lost because the Germans went faster and surrounded them and scared the hell out of them and sent them packing with their new blitzkrieg tactics. That was it. It wasn't numerical. It was all came down to leadership and bravery, but also audacity. Like within those Rommel stories, he would be down on fuel. He would he would scavenge all he could, and he would say, "Go in there and surround them and keep pushing, even if we're at the end of the logistical rope. The more we can push, the more they'll run." And that's exactly what happened.
IQ, and turn it over to you.
The photographers, did they take pictures of the concentration camps? I don't think.
This was 1940. So at this time, there was no death camps yet. Those didn't get ramped up till after the Germans had invaded Russia and Poland was able to be used as a staging ground for the industrial camps. But nonetheless, you do see them marching a lot of prisoners away. Now, in the 1941 book that I'm putting together right now with the Russia campaign, you see them rounding up Jews in Minsk. I have pictures of Jews being walked away, or even Russian POWs who were probably starved to death. So in the newer book, I get that. But in the 1940 campaign, that wasn't yet part of the war picture.
Yeah, fully understand that. Yeah, you're right. Because they started in 1942, 43.
Yeah, when it really started to get ramped up.
Yeah, yeah.
But nonetheless, behind the scenes, those SS units were following up and rounding up people, but I don't have pictures of that. But that was happening from the very beginning.
These were the Einsatzgruppen.
That's right. That was in Russia. Those were the special action groups.
Yeah.
That went around. That really happened big time in Russia. Not so much in Western Europe, because I think a lot of the Jews in Western Europe were just put into ghettos, like in certain cities, in Amsterdam or wherever. And they weren't being shipped away. They were being, kind of sealed up in certain areas and being counted, probably, as well.
Were they treated well?
I don't, you know what?
No, I'm talking, sorry, I'm talking about the prisoners, the American. prisoners when they were captured?
Well, American officers were treated well by Germans, but obviously that didn't happen until later in the war as well. One of the things that you got to realize with World War II is, we didn't get into combat until more than halfway through the war. Other than flying bombing missions, we didn't land in North Africa till November of 1942. So, the first 3 years were all Britain, in the Western Europe, and then North Africa, and then Germany invading Russia, and so Americans are half the war,
Yep.
essentially. Now I have 9 relatives in my family who fought in World War II. Not all of them were in combat units. A good number of them were. Uh, so in my previous book to this, I have unit stories of my relatives who fought in Europe with various divisions and regiments from Normandy all the way through to through Germany.
What do you think of the leadership of the American army?
Well, there was a famous quote from Rommel who said, "The Americans learned faster and did better than anyone in the war for how short amount of time they'd been in." So, you know, one of the advantages that we had, of course, is that we had tons of equipment and we could bring that to bear. But early in the war, we didn't have that. And we had a lot of officers who'd never been in combat. So that was a liability in the beginning as well. There were a lot of officers that fell off because they couldn't hack it in combat. So we had a learning curve, and a lot of our soldiers were just fresh off the farm. My relatives who ended up in the war were from Iowa and Nebraska, or from Los Angeles, who had been working as a mechanic or something, and all of a sudden they're carrying a rifle. So we had a learning curve, but considering how small our army was when we got into it and what it became, it's like a unbelievable feat, because we just train rolled everyone with our industry.
True, you had a fantastic man in Patton.
Yes, absolutely.
Really, that he was unbelievable. He really was.
And there were so many good commanders throughout the Pacific and in Europe. Collins and Mark Clark and General Bradley. There were so many good ones that you can cite who did great things. And my uncle was in the 5th Armored Division. My great uncle was in the 5th Armored Division, and they had a terrific division commander named Oliver Lunsford, who saw combat in North Africa with the British before the Americans landed, and he came up with a number of innovations in armored for doing armored warfare that became part of American armored doctrine. So there was a lot of great commanders. And General Marshall is at the top of the heap as one of the great, commanders, civilian commanders of all time.
I'd like to jump in here. The only one I'd argue with is Mark Clark. I think the most incompetent general.
I know. Yeah, I've heard that a lot too. And I mean, he did some great stuff, and he also had some things that were up against him, but he wasn't as bad as everyone says, and he's probably not as good as everyone thinks. So
I don't know if we can find anybody right now that thinks very well of him. But let me ask you this question. I've seen a couple of books on World War II. They seem to say that what the Americans did was allow people to make mistakes and bring them back to command when they learned. I want to say Middendorf in North Africa. You can name a couple. But let's talk about your book more
Okay.
than this, because I'd like to go back. What do you, of all your photos, what do you think that they really demonstrate to the reader?
Well, the Western campaign was so unique in a way that it shows the reader that the Germans were very much ahead of everyone else in terms of doctrine. And I try to emphasize that by the text that I put in the book. And I also put in a section about the history of the German General Staff. Because when you get down to it, the German General Staff is one of the finest professional command organizations ever in history. It's got a 400-year history going back to 1657. And if you look at the doctrines they developed over many centuries, and especially after the Napoleonic Wars, by the time the turn of the century, so from 1900, around 1900, the Germans had the best military command organization in the world, and all the major powers ended up fashioning their command structures on the German model. And then you can take it one step further and say all major organizations, whether it's corporate or governmental, are also based on the organizational structures tuned up by the German General Staff in that 100 years, say from 1830 to 1900 or 70 years. So that I wanted to come through because a lot of people don't look at that. They don't realize how truly amazing that institution was. And if they'd been given more latitude from Hitler, and because Hitler just hated them, he hated those,
Yeah.
and so, but a lot of times they were right. Now, a lot of times they weren't because they were timid and he hated the fact that they weren't bold enough for him. And the younger firebrands like Guderian and Rommel and these armored firebrands were showing the way and making the older generals look bad. So I wanted that to come through. How these younger think they were defying the doctrine, but they still were operating within that highly professional environment that the Germans' general staff had created. And can you imagine if they had a massive industry behind them? I mean, because they were amazing. A lot of people try to say that, oh, the Germans were just robots on the field. They just did whatever we were told. And it's not true. It's kind of a myth. Because when they were retreating from Russia, those 2 years, those bitter retreats, they performed some of the most amazing military operations with overlapping withdrawals that made the Russians pay dearly for every mile that they advanced. And they were amazingly well done with limited resources. And so the German general staff is just something that needs to be known more about in terms of that history.
Well, also, let's talk about the ordinary German soldier, who generally 8 men, what is it, 8 man units that were able to operate so effectively and so creatively. Uh, we seem to think of the German army as a rigid, as you said just
Right.
now. But what it really was a very flexible unit. Each
Absolutely.
each home unit was very flexible.
Well, and also, we also, I mean, what a lot of people know, especially if they study history a lot, is they pioneered the combined operations structure, where it was artillery, tanks, infantry, and air all operating within the same dynamic. No separation. They were complementing each other. And that's the other thing that baffled the Western Allies in that 1940 campaign, because they were getting the whole combined operational force right in the face, and it bewildered them. It bewildered them and sent them packing. And but the British officers did miracles by getting all their guys out, able to be evacuated. Alan Brooke and Sir John Dill, who ended up being chief of the general staff of the Imperial General Staff, they did amazing things getting those guys to the coast in time to be evacuated. So the British officers deserve a lot of credit for that.
Well, do you think that the generals that were executed, the German generals that executed after the war, should have been?
Well, a lot of them knew what was going on. They tried to say that, they didn't know about the Einsatzgruppen or the slaughter of indiscriminate slaughter, but they knew. The top guys had been given, they'd seen those documents where it was spelled out, when we invade, there's no mercy. The Russians are just going to be mowed down like wheat, and that's what we're going to do. So it's a very tricky topic. They were professional soldiers who had come up in the Prussian tradition of service to the state. They ended up losing the power battle to Hitler, forced to give an oath to the Fuhrer instead of the German state. So it's really such a strange dynamic that they existed within, especially the guys who were at the top of the heap, the Jodls, the Keitels, Brauchwitz, and all those guys, and Beck, who quit. And there was a lot of people who undermined Hitler. So it's a very interesting topic.
Well,
Thank you.
yeah,
I
no,
can go on, but please.
that's okay. No, because what happened, you have a Prussian officer corps for maybe 300, 400 years to be led by an incompetent man like Hitler. What was he, a sergeant?
Yep, that's true. That's true. He would, but at the same time, he blamed the loss of World War I on those same guys.
True.
And he
No,
would
but
tell them, I was in the trenches while you were back having steak when we lost World War I. So why would I listen to you?
correct. That's why he screwed up in World War II. That's exactly what happened.
Well, and
Yeah.
he picked on the
Sorry.
wrong countries. There's an old axiom in Russia. No, there's two axioms: never invade Russia, never invade China.
Yeah.
Because those are like impossibilities. But you know what? He almost pulled it off. And it took half the world. It took half the world to put him in the dirt.
Yes, but he was prepared for extermination. He prepared Germany in 9 years, from 1930 to 1939. He made them, turned them from a civilized society to a criminal society. He said, give me the children. They gave him the children. And in 9 years, these children became mass murderers. By the way, that's what's happening in Europe now. The Muslims are taking over.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a scary thing.
Michael, I don't know if you know this, but I have a book in my articles. I compare Hitler's Mein Kampf with the Quran, and you won't believe the similarities between the two.
I believe it.
No, honestly, I quote chapter and verse from the Quran and then chapter and verse and page number of Hitler's Mein Kampf, and they're identical. Hate mongering, war mongering, misogynist, racist, duplicitous, everything that Islam has, Hitler had. By the way, he respected Islam. He spoke about the Muslims as a fighting people, and he respected Muhammad, the author of Islam. Yeah, it's
Right.
only his. By the way, it's only Mein Kampf. But I'm telling you, it's all in Mein Kampf.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was such, and you know, when you look at Hitler and Stalin kind of learned from each other. There was a lot of quotes from Hitler saying, "I wish I'd been more like Stalin in my drive to eliminate everyone else who could have been a threat to me."
Yeah.
And you know, they learned from each other in their quest for whatever they were doing.
You know what's interesting? Nazi. The acronym Nazi is National German Workers' Party.
Oh,
The
that's
National
right.
Socialist German Workers' Party. So it's not
Yeah.
a right wing, it's
No,
a left wing. It's a
that's true.
Marxist left wing.
That's
But they,
totally
yeah,
true.
yeah, but they keep lying to us, telling us, no, he's right wing. No, he's not right wing. He is a leftist, or he was a leftist.
Yeah,
That's what,
absolutely.
yeah,
Which just means government control.
complete, yeah.
Government control is the name of the
Dictatorship,
game.
yeah. So you said you're going to make another book now.
Yeah, well, the book I'm working on right now is going to be a 1941 German war campaign pictorials, and I've got 2 blocks of photos that I've laid out, 2 or 3 actually. That one of them is North Africa, and those are taken. A lot of those pictures taken by Rommel, and then the other part of it is Russia, the invasion of Russia from Poland with the 29th Motorized Infantry Division, which was part of Guderian's group, Panzer Corps, that was in Army Group Center. And they left from Warsaw and attacked straight towards Moscow. And what's great is I'm able to use Guderian's autobiography, Panzer Leader, and he mentions the 29th, and I've got 200 pictures from the 29th Division, and he mentions them throughout that part of the book. So I'm able to complement those photo blocks with portions of his book that mentions that division. And in that, like I mentioned, there was a lot of gruesome pictures in that of, you know, partisans being mowed down and people, you know, some really gruesome scenes, villages burning, you know, a lot of gruesome stuff in those pictures. And then, so that is, I'm about halfway through that book. It should be out at the end of the year. It's also going to be 8.5 by 11, the larger format, probably about 400 pages. And those books
That's a
are
huge.
they're a little easier for me to produce. Like, I had a book come out last year that was it's about history leading to the 50th anniversary of D-Day. And it's a subtitle is My Journey Through World and Family History Landed at Omaha Beach, because I went to the 50th anniversary of D-Day. And this is an extensive book that has a lot of history in it, and especially it's got 4 chapters based on my relatives' units. One of them from World War One. My grandfather was with the 42nd Red Rainbow Division. This was a famous National Guard division that MacArthur named when he was right before when we got into World War One. And it wanted to be a National Guard division with units from all over the country. So MacArthur pointed at the map and said, yeah, it'll be like a rainbow over the whole country. So they named it the Rainbow Division. And William Donovan was in it as a major who ended up becoming head of the CIA and OSS during World War II. MacArthur was the chief of staff. And the unit that my grandfather was in was an Iowa regiment that MacArthur's father had commanded in the Philippines when he was Governor General of the Philippines. So I was able to put all the great personal history of those gentlemen in with the history of my grandfather's unit in that particular chapter of the book.
It looks like a thick book. How
It
many
is.
pages?
It's 880 pages.
Wow.
Oh no, 780 actually, 780, and it's got so much history in it. It really goes through it goes through, and I've been to Russia twice. I went across Russia in July of '92, right after this was my book that came out 3 years ago, which was Round the World and Across Russia in 21 Days, and 12 planes and 22 aviators um, through 11 countries when the Soviet Union fell and Russia returned. We were there in July of 1992, 7 months after the Soviet Union voted itself out of business, and we were guests of Vice President Rutskoy and Yeltsin. And there was all single and twin engine planes flying around the world in 21 days. So I've been to Russia twice. I went back there with my to-be wife to St. Petersburg. So within my history book, I visited a bunch of World War II memorials in Russia. And I went to the Museum of Communism in St. Petersburg. So within my book, I will put in a lot of Russia stuff as well, because Americans tend to forget that 80% of all the Germans killed in World War II were killed in Russia by the Russians, by the Soviet army. We were
80%?
involved big time. Yes, eight out of every 10 Germans killed in World War II were killed in Russia.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. I didn't know that. Honestly, I didn't know that. And I
Yeah.
studied the subject. I really studied the subject. 80%. Oh my goodness.
Yes. So
Wow.
without that, and when you think about it, how much tougher it would have been without that, and they lost 20
Well,
million people in that war.
but what really, to me, surprised, 27 million Russians
Yeah.
were killed.
Yeah.
The Germans managed to kill an awful lot of people. If you
Yes,
think
And
about it.
and also their tactics, the Russian tactics were, if there's a minefield in a valley, send in a division. You'll lose 10,000 guys, but we'll clear the valley. So that's how Russia fights wars. They don't care about saving lives. There's a famous story of Eisenhower when he went to Moscow after the war. He was telling General Zhukov about all the innovations the American Army had for saving lives and clearing minefields and doing this and all the devices. And Zhukov just laughed at him and he said, "Yeah, we just send in a division." So that's the way. When I was in St. Petersburg, the Leningrad Cemetery in St. Petersburg. Now, during the siege of Leningrad, over 1 million people starved to death within those 3 years that it was under siege. And they buried them in these mass graves, which is now the Leningrad Cemetery. And I visited there. And you walk in and you go past these mounds. And each mound has just a year date on it, a little plaque which says 1943, 1943 as you walk down this line. And each mound represents 50,000 people in that grave. And you walk and it's just mound after mound after mound. There's like 450,000 souls represented there.
But if you look at the Ukrainian war today, they
Same
haven't
thing.
changed tactics.
Same
The
thing.
tactics are still the same.
Yep. It's a Slavic civil war, and they're fighting it just like Slavics have always fought wars for 1,000 years. So nothing's changed in terms of that. And I married a Russian woman. I joined the Russian Orthodox Church, and she's got family in Ukraine and in Russia. So she's on two sides of that fence. And it's very difficult, and I don't know when it's going to end, but Russia is certainly taking a pounding as of late.
Well, Putin is making a mistake. He really should have listened to Trump. Trump was literally giving him a leeway to get out with saving face, but he made a mistake. he should have listened to Trump. That's my opinion.
I think he made a mistake when he invaded, but that's a different story.
Yeah, but
Um,
we agree on that. But the thing is now how to resolve it.
yeah.
I agree
Yeah.
with you. The invasion was wrong, but how do you resolve it? And Trump was giving him a chance to save
Yep.
face. Anyway, we'll see. But in the meantime, young
Mhm.
people are dying.
Yep. And can you imagine? Okay, if Ukraine continues to just decimate the Russian energy infrastructure with these drone attacks, which have been happening for the last month or two, it's going to take 10 or 15 years to repair all that infrastructure.
Correct.
And in the meantime, the Russian people are going to have no gas, no heating oil, and it's just going to be a nightmare.
And no money.
Yeah, it's going to be a
Yeah,
humanitarian nightmare.
yeah. No, it's a huge mistake now. It's a huge mistake. What do you think of the trip to Asia, Trump?
Oh, I think, well, it seems like it went okay. I don't know all the ins and outs. I'm not privy to that, but he's certainly making the rounds. He doesn't sit around and wait on events. He just charges in and tries to get something done. I often think about when people are stuck and somebody says, just do something. Just try something. And that's what he does. He just tries something.
Yes, but he's succeeding. The
Yeah.
beauty, the beauty of it is he's succeeding. He's trying, but he's succeeding. I mean, in 9 months, now it's 10 months, he has more productivity than any president in the history of the republic.
Lots been going on, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Lots been
good.
going on.
So
But
after this next book, after the
mhm.
next book, do you have anything else on your mind?
Well,
You must.
I've got another picture book planned for after this, possibly a large format picture book based on the 50th anniversary of D-Day. That's kind of in the planning stages. I've also got a second book because I also went to the 50th anniversary of Pearl Harbor because I have a number of relatives that fought in the Pacific. I got a Pearl Harbor survivor. One of my uncles was a Pearl Harbor survivor. I got another great uncle who was infantry in New Guinea and the Philippines. I got my grandfather's cousin was blown up on an aircraft carrier, a famous aircraft carrier disaster. So I went to the 50th anniversary of Pearl Harbor to honor them. At the 50th, I attended a symposium given by the Arizona Memorial Foundation. Lasted 1 week, about 10 days, and I got to meet Medal of Honor guys. I got to meet Japanese pilots who bombed battleships, Japanese engineers who worked on the low running torpedoes. And so that is also part of a book that's about 60% done, which I've kind of put on the back burner while I do these picture books.
Yeah, because that's the question I was going to ask you. You concentrated on Europe, but not the Pacific.
I know. Well, the Pacific one has got a lot already in. It's just that what happened was I had bought thousands of pictures from a third party who mines the National Archives. So I would pay a certain amount and I would get 1,000 pictures of North Africa, or 1,000 pictures of the Western Campaign, or 1,000 pictures of the Russia, all German origin. And I was looking at these photos and these massive files that I'd bought for not much money. It was like 10, 20 bucks each. And I'm sitting there one night and I said, you know what? I've got a free book here. I've got so much material already written, and I got thousands of pictures standing in front of me that are already high res, good quality, and all I have to do is fold them into a new book. So this book that just came out, the 1940 war campaign book, only took me 3 years, 3 months to complete.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and that's what happened was one night I was staring at all those photos and I said, you know what? Screw it. I've got a free book here and I'm going to change course and I'm going to get this thing out in 3 months. And I did. And also I did it to help my Amazon author page. I wanted more books on my Amazon author page. So that was also why I did a left turn and started doing these picture books. It's kind of a two, I'm hoping something happens good. I'm doing these books as also a way to impress my kids, to show them I'm not a complete dolt and that I can complete something that's intellectually challenging. So they get copies of them because I don't live with my kids anymore. They live with their Russian mother about an hour away. So by sending them these books, they then get a different view of me that I hope helps me in their eyes. So that's another reason why I do these.
So, Michael, you are divorced, you mean?
Yeah.
Ah, oh, okay. That makes two of us.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
But my kids are getting into history a little bit because they're getting my books. In fact, so it's funny. I always babble on about World War II when I'm with my kids. I'm with them for a few days. I'll babble on for an hour about World War II and all this stuff and the family and whatnot. And so then about last year, my daughter was in history class and they were doing Jeopardy for history. And one of the topics was World War II. And my daughter knew all the answers. And all her friends in class were like, what? What's going on here? And the teacher is completely blown away because she knows all the stuff about World War II. And so that made me happy.
Yes, that should make you happy. When you have children who are excelling, it's the best thing in life.
Yeah, I'm just praying. Just keep praying. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm just, I like the history. I like reading history. I like writing, and so that's what I'm doing.
Honestly, you're doing a fantastic job because, I mean, this is a pictorial history of World War II. It's
Yep.
pictorial. It's not a joke.
I sold a few in Europe already on Amazon, which I was pleased about. So that was nice.
Well, which brings me my point. How do people get your book?
Yeah, it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. German 1940 war campaign pictorials. And my author name is Michael B. Butler. And if you go to my author page on Amazon, you'll see 4 books up there. My first book that came out recently was the serial killer book. I wrote a biography of a famous serial killer with a woman who knew him and had dealt with him as a clinical psychologist in jail. And that one is, in fact, the serial killer book came out 3 years ago, and we're still doing well with it. We just sold a bunch in Europe, a bunch in Australia, UK, Canada, and we solved actually a 40-year-old murder in that book because we had the killer's diaries, and we found out how someone got away with 2 murders with him, even though he'd been arrested. They couldn't prosecute him because they didn't know. And they had no physical evidence, but no one was sure if he'd done it. But we had his diaries that were hidden for 40 years, and we were able to show that this accomplice, in fact, did that. So that's why I've come out with 4 books in the last 4 years. The serial killer book took 4 years to write. That was brutal.
What made you turn into writing?
Well, it happened by accident, as so many things in life do. My first book was about in 1992 when I did the world flight across Russia. It was supposed to be a yearly event. It was originally organized from March of 1991, and in the middle of organizing, the Soviet Union fell apart and disappeared. The organizers were French people, and of a famous rally organizers. So this was supposed to be the first world flight around the world across Russia. And every year they were going to do a different route across Russia with a different group of aviators, single engine and twin engine planes, private aviators. It never happened again. After 1992, the Moscow government said, we can't guarantee your safety. You're done. And so it never happened again. We followed the same routes as Wiley Post, Howard Hughes, and the Graf Zeppelin. So 2 years after the fact, I got all these pilot journals in the mail from these pilots, and I said, this is a book. So in 1994, I sat down for 2 years, wrote the first world flight book, found an aviation publisher, Wind Canyon Books. They published it in 98. Then I had a history book based on my trips to the 50th anniversaries that was going to come out. I signed a contract, done all this writing. The publisher changed course. It never came out. I carried those history files around with me in digital devices for 25 years, from flash drives to external drives to laptops. I kept transferring it, never looking at it until last summer, 2 years ago, when I did the second World Flight book. And I called the publisher of the World Flight book and I asked for the rights to the story back, and she gave them to me. And I had all those files. She gave me the original manuscript, plus I had those text files that were extensive, all that history I'd written, that I'd carried around for 25 years, that they never got lost. And I unearthed all those digital files from my digital basement and turned them into 2 books within 2 years. And that's kind of how my recent foray into writing, because I had not done any writing for 15, 20 years. So now I'm back in the swing of things. And the break was when I got the contract to co-write the serial killer book. I was brought in as a ghostwriter by this woman who was an ex-client. And that turned out to be a 4-year contract. And then by coincidence, it led to the other 3 books. So I have her to thank for my recent books. So that's the short story of that. And so that's it. And I hope I can keep the train rolling.
Let's go back to a minute to the murder, the book about the murder. He had an accomplice that no one knew about.
Well, he had 5 accomplices. Bill Bonin was known as the freeway killer. He murdered 22 kids in 10 months in Los Angeles from August 1979 to June 1980. He convinced 5 other people, young kids mainly, to help him kill these kids. All his victims were between 12 and 19. A lot of them were homosexual hustlers. So there were 5 accomplices. 4 of them got caught when it all got rolled up. The 5th one got caught, but there was no physical evidence. And they had to let him go. And Bonin wasn't going to give him up. And no one else knew him. All the other accomplices didn't know who he was. And that story, this aspect of his story, now he's a famous serial killer. William Bill Bonin, the freeway killer, famous. His biggest murder trial in Southern California in 1981 that had ever been. So the reason we were able to do this is the woman I worked on the book with was a clinical psychologist. She was in the Southern California jail because one of Bonin's accomplices committed suicide in jail, and he was going to testify against Bonin. So they brought her in to sit down and counsel serial killers who were awaiting trial so they wouldn't kill themselves. Then, after she left the job, some ex-sheriff investigator gave her 40 boxes of documents based on Bonin's life. And they included those diaries that had been hidden, his personal jailhouse diaries and murder confession diaries that we were able to use to construct the book. They'd never been used in any biography. So we solved those 2 murders, and we shed light on Bonin in a very different way than had ever been done. Because we had his personal thoughts about the lawyers, the media, what was going on around him, his accomplices, and he was a smart guy. But he was a Vietnam vet. Saw combat as a helicopter gunner in Vietnam during the Tet Offensive. Came back as a completely different person. Was a pedophile, seriously aggressive pedophile. So that's what that book is about. It's called Without Redemption. You'll see it on my author page. It's a good story, and when I was writing the murder stories, I had nightmares every night, and it took me 6 months. So I started watching all the most syrupy romantic comedies that I could find on Amazon, and the high school ones were the best because they washed my brain of what I had to deal with during the day in terms of constructing those stories.
Michael, it's been a pleasure meeting you, honestly.
You as well. You as well. Thank you for your time. Thank you for
We
your
have to
energy.
meet. James, we have to meet with him again when he publishes the book.
Oh yes,
Sounds
yes.
good.
I would love to have you back and
Okay.
talk a little bit more about the Freeway Killer book too,
Okay.
because
Absolutely. Anytime.
that would be fun. So let's start with Don Mazzella. Don, bring us up to speed on all your projects and everything you're doing there, Mazzella.
Well, the Ruler of the Seas is doing well, and my new mystery is doing even better. So I'm happy there. Then there's always the National Robotics Education Foundation, the-nref.org. Outside of that, just keep going.
Yeah, that's right.
That's all you can ask for, baby. So IQ Al Rizzoli, bring us up to speed on your latest columns and everything you're doing.
Well, you're publishing all my columns anyway.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. But as I was telling Michael, my books are called Lifting the Veil, The True Faces of Muhammad and Islam, and they are in Amazon if they want them. Don, it was a pleasure meeting you again. We'll hope to see you on Thursday.
Definitely. Michael, before we let you go, how do we get your books and keep up with you, Mr. Butler?
Yeah, Amazon and Barnes and Noble, they're both up there, and they're reasonably priced in Kindle. They're all available in Kindle, and you know, I hope someone buys them because I think they'll learn a lot of history and get some interesting enjoyment out of them. So I appreciate it. Michael B. Butler is the author name, and you'll see everything on Amazon.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well,
Thank
everybody, you guys were amazing today. I look forward to doing this again, and we'll talk to everybody soon. Dawn, I'll talk to you next week, and IQ, we'll talk to you on Tuesday.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody.